This week's Nifty Gifties on F5 Live Refreshing Technology is proudly powered by the Microsoft Store. Whether you're looking for a new laptop, tablet, Xbox, games, or a whole lot more, you can get them at the Microsoft Store. Remember, current students, faculty, parents, and active military can save up to 10% off almost everything. To browse the products and learn more about the discounts, you can go to f5live.tv/Microsoft. All right, I'll respond to chat first. Yes, I know, very exciting. I'm very excited about it. Anyway, on to the news. This week, something interesting happened. By this week, pretend today's Sunday, because that's the context in which this was written. Last week, something interesting happened. People with Asus routers started to see the internet disappear on them. It would go offline. Everything looked like it was right. Nothing had theoretically changed, but the internet collapsed. Just went away. Fortunately for us, we have lots of internet-connected devices these days that do not require us to have a landline connection. And so people, as they started to go down, would go onto online forums and look for information, and there did not seem to be any. They went to Asus's website. Didn't seem to be anything. Twitter. Didn't seem to be anything. They went to the forums, and they started posting. They started to see more and more people saying, hey, did your router go out? Which was an indication a little bit that they weren't losing their minds, right? They didn't do anything wrong. Other people were experiencing it. Turns out people started to experience it all around the world. But Asus didn't say anything. They weren't participating in the forums. There was nothing on Twitter or Facebook. There was no press release, nothing in their news section, just silence. Now, we've seen silence before when internet-connected devices go down. Famously, Insteon a couple of months ago, the company completely disappeared and all of their devices stopped working. And they didn't say anything about it until somebody hit them over the head, possibly with a hammer. And they finally said, oh yeah, no, we're gone. Somebody bought the company, brought it back out of the graveyard. But that obviously wasn't the case here. Asus didn't go out of business overnight. So what happened? Well, after 48 hours, almost 48 hours of radio silence, Asus finally came out and said, oops, our bad. We published a bad update. Which would have been great information to have earlier so that people didn't think that they had broken something. As it turns out, there was a config file that was bad, possibly a JSON file with a comma in the wrong place, that type of thing. And it was taking down routers. Their solution, step 1, follow the IT crowd's example and turn it off and on again. If that didn't work, you had to download a firmware file and try and force it onto the router yourself. If you're not the kind of person to do that, you could do a hard reset on the router and it would automatically grab the file. No matter what the problem was, though, Abram, my problem with all of this is the fact that they were quiet about what was going on, rather than coming out and going, hey, we're hearing reports that there's a problem, we're working on it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a serious problem, especially when you consider that Asus is such a major router maker these days. Like, yeah. We're going to start doing some more, a higher volume of router reviews on Tom's Hardware, and I was doing some product research this week into whether or not, like what routers we really need to be testing. And, I always thought of Asus as like, okay, they make the gaming routers for high-end stuff, but there's actually a lot of Asus routers in the market at a variety of price points. They seem to be, a really big player in the space right now. So a lot of people would be affected by an Asus router outage.
Yeah. Yeah. And, like we've said, outages happen. sometimes hardware goes bad, updates happen. AT&T, at some point, I think in the 80s, missed a semicolon and knocked out long distance calling to like 2/3 of the country. You know, these things happen. Better testing would prevent that, but you know, whatever. It happened. At least they could have gone on Twitter and gone, "Hey guys, we see there's a problem. We don't know what it is, but we're working on it." Instead of, "Shh, if we don't say anything, nobody will know." Which is how I always feel when these companies don't respond to these types of situations.
Yeah, I mean, it's a serious problem. I mean, people had a lot of issues because of it, and it's obviously a terrible situation and just really terrible customer service. You know, you got to let people know right away.
Especially when you're dealing with something as like fundamental, core as your home router, right? It's not a small thing. For a lot of people, for me, if my router went out, yeah, I've got backups, but if my router went out, there are some lights in my house that wouldn't turn on. There's a lot in this studio that wouldn't power on, including the lights behind me. There's, you know, if the router went down, trouble exists everywhere and immediately. So at least being able to say, "Hey, we think this is on us. We'll be with you as soon as we figure out what's going on." At least that makes you feel a little less crazy and like they're working on it. Not that they've dug a hole somewhere and they have no idea that something even exists.
Yeah, I mean, it would make me really think twice, because if you have something where there's an outage like that, first of all, it's bad enough, but then having, you know, the lack of communication, that would be just a killer.
Yeah, for sure. So, guys, all of these companies, listen, we know it's embarrassing. You're hoping that whatever the problem is isn't your fault. But at least acknowledge that you know something is happening. Even if it's not your fault, don't go, "Hey, this is on us." Say, "Hey, we're getting reports. We're looking into it. We'll be with you as soon as we've got an idea." You don't have to take blame up front, but at least acknowledge that you know that it's happening. Don't go dark, hide in a closet somewhere. Because we know it's happening. At least acknowledge it and help us feel less crazy. Because if you don't acknowledge it, we feel like maybe we're misinterpreting reality. Right? Back to the comment about the simulation. Maybe something's not rendering right and this is actually all on us. Just acknowledge it and move on. Nobody's going to get madder that you acknowledged it than coming up later and saying, "Hey, we figured it out." Just acknowledge these things. That's it. That's what we're asking. That's all we're asking. Hello, YouTube. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this episode of F5 Live Refreshing Technology. If you did, please subscribe to the channel down below, and of course hit the notification bell because we know that subscriptions don't mean much on YouTube anymore. If you've got topics that you'd like us to talk about in the future, please comment them down below. And if you'd like to not follow us on YouTube, there's lots of ways that you can follow along with our content by going to plughitslive.com/subscribe. There you'll see all of our shows and all of the ways that you can watch, listen, and follow along.